A glaze is pretty darn easy to make. I've got all these homegrown oranges and mandarins from a neighbor. We're not going to waste time showing you how to juice some oranges. I'm just going to juice these. I'll be right back. See you very soon. So I've got about 1.5 cups of orange juice. And this is how simple this is. I'm just going to pour that in. I've got 3/4 cup, maybe a cup of white sugar. I use white sugar because I want this to stay clear. You can use brown sugar, but it turns your glaze, it gives a much darker appearance, and I want a nice orange as I can get it. So, and without the sugar, it doesn't get thick. I'm going to put a couple tablespoons of mirin in there. I'm going to put 2 or 3 star anise in there. And I'm going to put a piece of cinnamon bark. The other thing is, I've got some homemade jam from my wife. I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of that in. How good does that look? The trick here is just a pinch of salt. I learned many years ago that whenever you're making something really sweet, even just a pinch of salt, a tiniest bit of salt, just improves it. It just does something to it. I don't know what exactly it does. Maybe it balances it out to some degree. But it just gives it that little tiny bit of oomph. All we do now is we put this on a simmer, a pretty high simmer, and we just boil it down till it reduces to where it gets to your desired thickness. And there's a way to know when to stop cooking it. Otherwise, when it dries, it just hardens and yes, I've done that before. It's the size of the bubbles that are coming up to the top is what you're looking for. But look, we're at least an hour off that. So let's go over to the stove and let's get this thing started. I have just turned on the heat, so it's not even close to hot yet. I did forget to tell you that I've got some orange rind there that I put in. All that eventually comes out. And look, even though it's just the liquid from oranges, you constantly have to scrape off, I guess you call it scum, on the top, and it just keeps coming to the top. And I use one of these things here. It's perfect. You'll see soon exactly why I use this. Look, we'll come back to this about when it's probably reduced about halfway, and you can see what it looks like. It's probably a little bit more than halfway now, and I can tell it's just starting to get a little bit thick, but have a closer look at that. And you can see all the gunk and all the bits and pieces I put in there. I'm going to take all that out now. Also at this point, I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, because as it gets thicker and thicker, it'll start to seem like it's starting to boil more rapidly, and it's not what we want. I'm not sure if you can see that in the little camera. The little bubbles that are coming up from the actual bottom of the pan, they're very tiny. They're not microscopic, but they're little. And as the glaze gets thicker and thicker, those bubbles have to get bigger and bigger to rise to the surface. And what we're looking for is those bubbles to get about the size of, well, what my little fingernail, about the size of a pea. You don't want them getting any larger than that. That's as large as you want to get. Even you might even think that I want it thicker. But the thing here is, remember that it's very hot. Even if it's really thick, it's going to seem a little more thin because it's hot. And when it cools down, it could dry very hard. We'll come back to this when our bubbles are getting to just that right size. Okay, we're nearly there. You can see the bubbles just rising to the surface. I've had to keep turning this down, and I've also had to keep getting the muck out of there. You can see all the stuff that comes out of there. Now, the bubbles are all different sizes in there. You're looking for the absolute largest bubbles that are coming up to the surface. See, I got to turn that down. The largest bubbles there are almost the size of my fingernail. So for me, that's done. It's making me hungry just smelling this. So in about an hour, you can take oranges, tangelos, mandarins, whatever you like there, and you can turn it into something like that. How nice is that? I've got a nice clear, very orangey. It's the reason why I use the white sugar instead of the brown sugar, because the brown sugar, that'd be much, much darker. And, oh man. I've made this specifically to go over the top of pork crackle. If you want to see how I did the slow roasted pork for this recipe, at the end of the video there will be a link. Also in this description below I'll also put a link. This is my favorite way to have pork belly. I've had it 100 different ways, but this is my absolute favorite. If you're worried about the fat content of pork belly, a lot of it is actually rendered out, but if you're still too worried, you think it's just too fatty, well, I'm afraid then you're going to miss out on one of the luxuries of life. Do I look like I'm afraid of fat? I don't think so. So as I always say, get in that kitchen of yours and cook something like this. Follow those. It's not hard to make something like that to impress your friends. Get in that kitchen of yours, make something amazing, just get inspired, do something, cook some really nice food. You have to survive, so you have to eat. Might as well be as good as you can possibly make it. I'm Rick Bichelle. This is You Can Cook. So long for now, everyone. We'll see you next time.